It was one of those mornings where the world outside the window seemed still and untouched. I lay on our bed, the warmth of the blanket tempting me to linger longer. The hum of a distant car passing on the street was the only sound, broken suddenly by the faint click of the front door shutting. The sound was soft yet jarring enough to pull me from the half-sleep I was clinging to. I sat up slowly, blinking away the haze of rest, and glanced at the empty spot beside me. My wife, Elena, wasn't there. It wasn't unusual for her to be an early riser, but the quietness of the house felt different today, heavier somehow. As I rubbed the sleep from my eyes, something on the dining table caught my attention. A piece of folded paper standing upright. My name was scrawled across the front in her familiar handwriting. I patted over, bare feet cold against the hardwood floor, and unfolded it. "Good morning, love," it read. "I didn't want to disturb you. My boss called. There's an urgent issue at work. I'll try to be home soon. Love, Elena." Work? On a Saturday? Elena had always been vocal about how much she despised the corporate grind. She practically counted down the hours to the weekend. Something about it didn't sit right with me, but I dismissed it. Maybe it was exactly what she'd said, an urgent issue. The morning passed in a haze of normalcy. I brushed my teeth, made some coffee, and stared at the pile of mail we'd been putting off sorting. I even flipped through a newspaper, though none of the words seemed to stick. By midday, I had convinced myself it was all fine, that she'd call or walk through the door any minute. But she didn't. By 9 p.m., the house had grown darker, quieter, and lonelier. I'd been flipping channels on the TV, more to fill the silence than out of interest. When I heard the faint rattle of keys, my heart lifted, but it was short-lived. Elena stepped inside, her face partially hidden in the dim light. She looked off. Her smile felt forced, a little too wide and a little too quick. "You're home late," I said, standing from the couch. "Oh, yeah. Work was crazy," she replied. "But then my friend Lisa called me, crying about her grandfather. I couldn't leave her alone, so I went with her to check on him. It was a whole thing." Her words tumbled out too quickly, like she had rehearsed them, but hadn't expected me to ask. I frowned. "But the note?" "Oh yeah," she interrupted, her voice suddenly high-pitched. "That was for the morning. Before Lisa called me." A pit began forming in my stomach. She avoided my eyes, fidgeting with her purse strap. I crossed my arms, watching her closely. "Are you hiding something, Elena?" "Don't be ridiculous," she said with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "You must be hungry." "I brought pizza." She held up the box like it was a peace offering, but I didn't move. The scent of cheese and garlic filled the air, but all I could taste was doubt. That night, I lay on our bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning like the fan overhead. The pizza box was still on the counter, untouched. Elena had brushed off my questions with that practiced ease of hers and retreated to bed almost immediately. But her behavior left a shadow in the house that I couldn't ignore. I replayed the day in my head. Elena didn't even like her job, so what could possibly have dragged her into the office on a Saturday? And then her friend's sick grandfather? I couldn't piece it together, and the attempt to make sense of it only deepened the knot in my stomach. In recent weeks, she had seemed different, distracted, forgetful even. Her usual efficiency at work, something she'd always been proud of, seemed to waver. Her stories didn't add up anymore. I hated myself for doubting her, but I couldn't ignore the little inconsistencies, the hesitation in her voice, the way she rushed to change the subject whenever I pushed for details. She wasn't acting like Elena, not the woman I knew, not the woman I married. The thoughts kept swirling, each one darker than the last, until sleep finally claimed me. But it wasn't peaceful. My dreams were filled with fragments of conversations, her laugh ringing hollow, and shadowy images I couldn't fully grasp. I woke to the smell of something wonderful wafting from the kitchen. The scent of sizzling bacon and warm cinnamon rolls greeted me before the sight of sunlight streaming through the windows. For a moment, I almost forgot the heaviness of the previous night. When I stepped into the kitchen, there she was, humming softly as she flipped a pancake onto a plate. She turned, beaming at me with that familiar smile, the one that used to melt away all my worries. "Good morning, sleepyhead," she said cheerfully, setting the plate on the table. "I thought I'd spoil you a little today." Sit, eat. I forced a smile and sat down. The meal was perfect, just like she always made it. The flavors brought a wave of nostalgia, but I couldn't shake the growing unease. I watched her out of the corner of my eye as we ate. She was texting on her phone, her fingers darting across the screen with an urgency that didn't fit the calm morning. "Who's that?" I asked casually, hoping she wouldn't notice the edge in my voice. "Oh, just Lisa. She wants to catch up today," Elena replied, her voice light. She finished her coffee, placed the cup in the sink, and turned to me. "Dear, I was thinking I might go to the movies with her. Do you mind?" The question caught me off guard. Elena almost always included me in plans with her friends, especially casual outings like this. She said it so breezily, like she already knew I wouldn't object. "Of course not," I said after a moment, masking my surprise. "Have fun." She kissed me on the cheek, grabbed her purse, and left, her perfume lingering in the air long after the door closed. As the silence of the house settled around me, the unease returned with a vengeance. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I decided, for my own sanity, that I needed answers. I started with her drawers, carefully lifting stacks of neatly folded clothes. Everything seemed normal. I moved on to her desk, sorting through papers, receipts, and notebooks. Again, nothing out of the ordinary. An hour passed, and I was no closer to uncovering anything. I began to wonder if I was losing my mind, chasing shadows. But then I spotted her pants from the day before, crumpled in the corner of the laundry basket. She'd worn them when she claimed to have gone to work and then to her friend's house. Something tugged at me, urging me to check. I dug into the pockets, finding a few stray coins and a crumpled receipt. My heart raced as I reached into the back pocket. My fingers brushed against something stiff, thin, and metallic. I pulled it out, my stomach twisting as I realized what I was holding. A torn condom wrapper. It was just a small piece, but it might as well have been a grenade, its fragments ripping through every assumption I had left. My chest felt tight, and the room spun around me. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't something you accidentally carry around in your pocket. I sank to the floor, the tiny scrap of foil crumpled in my shaking hand. A part of me wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation, but deep down, I already knew there wasn't. The morning's warmth, the laughter, the perfect breakfast, all of it had been a performance, and I had played right into it. I sat on the floor, the crumpled foil wrapper in one hand and the receipt in the other. My heart pounded as I forced myself to focus on the neatly printed list of purchases. My eyes scanned the items, each word slicing through the last shreds of my denial. Condoms, lubricant, a bottle of wine, fresh strawberries. The perfect mix for a night I wasn't invited to. "So this is what she does when she goes out," I muttered, the words bitter in my mouth. Louder, angrier, I repeated it. "So this is how she went to work yesterday." I stood abruptly, gripping the receipt so tightly it crinkled into my palm. My breath came fast and uneven, the rage building like a storm. Every corner of the house seemed complicit in her betrayal, mocking me with its silence. For a moment, I wanted to destroy everything, throw the dishes, rip the pictures off the walls, scream until there was nothing left inside. But I stopped myself. Not yet. If I lost control now, I gained nothing. I needed answers. Proof. I needed to know the full extent of her lies. She came home at 9, just like the night before. I heard the sound of her keys in the door, then the click of her heels on the floor. The smell of her perfume preceded her as she walked into the living room. "You were watching a movie for a long time," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She hesitated, then smiled. "Oh well, we didn't actually make it to the theater. We decided to hang out at Lisa's place. You know, wine, snacks, a little fun girl talk." Her tone was breezy, but there was something off in her expression, an unease she tried to hide behind her smile. As she brushed past me, the faint scent of a man's cologne clung to her. My stomach churned, but I forced myself to act as though I hadn't noticed. She put her purse on the counter and headed straight to the shower without another word. The sound of running water filled the house, but it couldn't drown out the thoughts racing through my head. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to confront her, to demand an explanation. But I knew I wasn't ready. Not yet. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a towel with her damp hair clinging to her shoulders, she gave me a quick kiss on the cheek and climbed into bed. She was asleep within minutes, her breathing slow and steady. I lay beside her, staring at the ceiling, my body rigid with anger and disbelief. By 2 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. The weight of the evening, the unanswered questions, the growing certainty of her betrayal, it all pressed down on me like a vice. I turned my head to look at her sleeping form, her face peaceful and innocent, and felt a surge of cold fury. This was my chance. Moving as quietly as I could, I slipped out of bed and reached for her phone on the nightstand. My hands trembled as I picked it up, but to my surprise, there was no password. The screen unlocked easily, as though mocking me with its openness. I tapped in her messages, my breath catching as I read the first few threads. The texts with Lisa were harmless enough, mundane chatter about outfits and wine. But then I noticed 2 other conversations. 2 men. Their names weren't saved, just numbers. The text threads between them were long, filled with emojis and inside jokes, the kind of back and forth that hinted at more than casual friendship. I opened one thread, scrolling through quickly. My heart sank as I read the messages. Can't wait for tomorrow night. Same time, same place. You know it. Bring the wine. I'll handle the rest. Winking face. You're such a tease, babe. I moved to the second thread. The messages here were more graphic, vivid descriptions of things I couldn't bring myself to picture her doing with someone else. My chest tightened as I read yesterday's messages, piecing together her evening with excruciating clarity. She hadn't been at Lisa's. She'd been with him. The final straw came when I saw a message time-stamped earlier that evening. After work tomorrow, 7 p.m. You free? The response had been almost immediate. Of course. I'll be waiting. I stared at the phone, my hands trembling with a mix of rage and humiliation. My breathing quickened, my mind racing as the truth settled in. She had a lover, maybe more than one. My first impulse was to wake her, to confront her with everything I'd found. But then an idea formed, sharp and clear. If they were planning to meet tomorrow at 7 p.m., I'd make sure to be there first. This wasn't just about answers anymore. It was about taking back control. I woke before my alarm, the previous night's discoveries thrumming in my veins like an unwelcome stimulant. My wife lay beside me, oblivious, her breathing soft and steady. I wanted to shake her awake, force her to answer the questions rattling in my mind, but I didn't. I needed her to stay unaware of what I knew. By the time she stirred, I was already dressed. We ate breakfast in silence, the tension between us palpable, though she acted as if nothing was wrong. When we were ready to leave for work, Elena hesitated, her hand lingering on her purse as though she wanted to say something. Finally, she looked at me, her eyes uncharacteristically nervous. You know, she began, her voice tentative, I didn't know how to tell you this before. My heart leapt, my thoughts immediately racing. Was this it? Was she about to confess? What is it? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. But before she could answer, her phone buzzed sharply, cutting through the moment. She glanced at the screen, muttered a quick apology, and answered it. I clenched my fists, struggling to contain my frustration as she drifted into another room, her voice dropping to a hushed tone. When she returned, the softness in her eyes was gone, replaced by her usual composed demeanor. I couldn't hold back any longer. So, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. What was it you wanted to tell me? Elena hesitated, a flicker of something unreadable crossing her face. Oh, she said, waving it off with a small laugh. I just wanted to remind you to pick up groceries for the house. That's all. For a moment, I just stared at her, unable to comprehend the casual absurdity of her words. My mind reeled. Was she playing me for a fool? Or was I so consumed by suspicion that I was seeing things that weren't there? The workday dragged. Every tick of the clock felt like an eternity, my mind replaying the morning's exchange on an endless loop. By 6, I was utterly drained, both physically and emotionally. Elena seemed just as worn down, her usual cheer replaced with quiet exhaustion. We drove home in silence, the only sound the faint hum of the car engine. When we walked through the front door, I headed straight for the couch, eager to collapse and forget the day. But then her phone rang again. The sound jolted me upright, and I instinctively listened. "Are you coming home today?" The voice on the other end was male, deep and casual. "Yes, Lisa," Elena replied smoothly, her voice tinged with what I could only describe as practiced ease. "I'll be there soon." I froze, every muscle in my body tensing. "Lisa?" I knew what I'd heard, and it wasn't a woman's voice. Elena hung up quickly and turned to me, her expression soft and apologetic. "I'm sorry, darling," she said, already heading for the bedroom. "Lisa isn't feeling well. I need to check on her." "Now?" I asked, though I knew better than to press her. She nodded, disappearing to change. Within minutes, she was dressed and out the door, leaving only her fading perfume behind. I didn't wait long. Grabbing my coat, I slipped out after her, careful to keep my distance as I followed her car through the darkening streets. My heart hammered as I kept her taillights in sight, my grip on the steering wheel tight. This was it. I would finally see for myself where she went and who she was meeting. Elena didn't go to Lisa's. That much was clear when she pulled into the parking lot of a small, out-of-the-way cafe. The kind of place that tried too hard to look charming, with its dim lighting and fake rustic decor. She parked quickly, stepping out and glancing around as though checking for someone. I slid my car into a spot a safe distance away, watching as a man emerged from a silver sedan nearby. He was tall, clean-cut, and exuded a confidence that set my teeth on edge. As Elena approached him, her face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. She touched his arm lightly, laughing at something he said before they disappeared inside together. The truth was undeniable now, glaring at me like a neon sign. This was her Lisa. This was the man she was lying to me about. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, as I debated my next move. I sat in the car, seething. My thoughts spiraled in a chaotic mess of anger and disbelief as I watched the door swing shut behind my wife and her lover. 10 minutes passed, maybe more. I couldn't bring myself to act, paralyzed by the war waging inside me. One part demanding action, the other begging for restraint. Just as I steeled myself to get out of the car and confront her, something else caught my eye. From down the street, a man approached on an electric scooter. He moved casually, his demeanor completely at odds with the storm inside me. He stopped in front of the cafe and knocked on the door. When the door opened, my stomach dropped. Elena stood there. But it wasn't just that she was opening the door. It was how she was dressed. Or rather, how she wasn't dressed. She stood there in her underwear, her hair loose around her shoulders, her skin glowing faintly under the dim porch light. The man grinned, said something I couldn't hear, and stepped inside. I slammed my fist into the dashboard. The plastic panel cracked under the force, the sound jarring even in my blind rage. My breath came in ragged gasps as I stared at the door that had just closed behind them. I couldn't wait. There was no right moment anymore. My hands trembled as I yanked the car door open and stepped into the cold night air. Rage burned in my chest as I walked briskly toward the house, ignoring the knot of fear forming in my stomach. The first thing I noticed when I got to the house was how dark it was. The ground floor was completely silent, the windows revealing only shadowed rooms. I crept around the perimeter, my footsteps soft on the gravel, and tried to find some sign of movement. Nothing. I circled back to the front door. My heart raced as I reached for the handle. The door creaked slightly as it opened, but the sound was lost in the blood pounding in my ears. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. The dim light from the street filtered through the windows, casting long, jagged shadows across the walls. I moved through the ground floor, peering into the kitchen, the living room, even a small study. Empty. All of it. Then I heard a voice. A man's voice, muffled but clear enough to send a fresh wave of anger coursing through me. "I'll put a camera here," the voice said, followed by a low laugh. Then Elena's voice, playful and light, responded, "Just cover my face so it won't be visible when you post it somewhere." The words hit me like a sledgehammer. My legs felt like they might give out beneath me, but I forced myself forward, climbing the stairs one slow, deliberate step at a time. Each creak of the old would seem deafening, but the voices upstairs masked the sound. As I reached the landing, Another sound reached my ears, soft, rhythmic clapping. It took me a moment to realize what it was, and when I did, my fists clenched so tightly that my nails bit into my palms. The door to the bedroom was slightly ajar, the sliver of light spilling into the hallway cutting through the darkness. I peered through the crack, my breath catching in my throat at the sight before me. Two men. My wife. Elena was on the bed, laughing as one of them adjusted a camera on a tripod. The other stood next to her, shirtless, his expression smug and confident. Her face was flushed, and she seemed completely at ease, as if this was just another evening. I didn't think. I couldn't. My body moved before my brain could catch up. I shoved the door open with a force that rattled the walls. What the hell is this? I bellowed, my voice filling the room. The scene froze. Elena's face drained of color, her playful grin replaced by wide-eyed panic. The man adjusting the camera stammered something incoherent, while the other simply stood there, his face turning an angry shade of red. So, this is how Lisa got sick? I snarled, stepping further into the room. My voice trembled with a mix of fury and disbelief. Is this what you've been doing? This is why you couldn't tell me the truth. Elena scrambled to cover herself with the bedsheet, her mouth opening and closing as she searched for words. The two men looked at each other, clearly unsure of what to do. It's not what it looks like, she stammered, her voice thin and shaky. Don't you dare insult me with that bullshit. I roared, my fists clenched at my sides. I saw everything. I heard everything. You've been lying to me this whole time. For a moment, no one moved. The air in the room was thick with tension, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on us. And then, finally, Elena whispered, I'm sorry, but it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. And in that moment, I knew things would never be the same. I couldn't take it anymore. The sight of them together, their laughter, their ease, it was too much. I pointed a trembling finger at the three of them, my voice low but laced with venom. You're all going to regret this. Every single one of you. Without thinking, I lunged for the camera perched on the tripod. The man standing next to it moved too slowly to stop me, his hand swiping at empty air as I clutched the device and bolted for the door. Shouts erupted behind me, but I didn't care. Adrenaline surged through me, drowning out everything except the sound of my own ragged breathing. Hey, stop! One of them yelled, his footsteps pounding after me. But as I barreled down the stairs and out into the night, he stopped short at the porch, unwilling, or too afraid, to follow me further. I reached my car, fumbling with the door as I tossed the camera onto the passenger seat. My hands shook as I started the engine, tires screeching as I sped away from the house and its sordid occupants. The fury inside me boiled over as I drove aimlessly through the dark streets, shouting into the void. Every betrayal, every lie, every unanswered question exploded from my chest in an incoherent storm of pain and rage. My knuckles turned white on the steering wheel, and tears blurred my vision as I struggled to stay on the road. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the house loomed like a silent witness to the chaos unraveling inside me. The camera sat in the passenger seat, mocking me with its stillness. I grabbed it and stormed inside, slamming the door behind me. Sitting at the kitchen table, I stared at the device in my hands. I didn't know why I'd taken it. Maybe I wanted proof, something tangible to justify the storm raging in my chest. Maybe I wanted to see everything, to force myself to face the truth. My fingers fumbled as I turned it on, the small screen flickering to life. The first video began to play, and my stomach churned. There they were, Elena and the two men, laughing, moving, touching. The angles were deliberate, the camera capturing every intimate detail with cruel precision. I clenched my jaw, but I couldn't look away. Each frame was a fresh wound, a blow to the life I thought we'd built together. The timestamps told the story of repeated meetings, each one more degrading than the last. There was no mistaking the ease with which they interacted, no denying the betrayal written in every frame. My hands tightened around the camera, and for a moment, I thought I might smash it against the wall. I didn't hear the door open until it was too late. Elena, I said, my voice cold and sharp as she stepped inside. She froze when she saw the camera in my hand, her face draining of color. Don't even think about it. Her lips parted, but no words came. I stood abruptly, holding the camera like a weapon. Why? I shouted, my voice cracking under the weight of my emotions. Why did you do this to me? To us? What the hell did I do to deserve this? Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't care. Answer me, I bellowed, my words echoing through the house. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice barely audible. She wiped at her face, her hands trembling. I wanted to tell you everything today, but I hesitated. And then, when I finally had the courage, the phone rang. That's your excuse? I spat. You hesitated? For how long, Elena? Days? Weeks? Months? She flinched, but didn't look away. I don't know how to explain it, she said, her voice trembling. I realized I'm addicted. To attention. To love. From different men. It's not about you. It's me. I miss you, but I want more. Her words hit me like a slap. My vision blurred with a mix of anger and disbelief. You miss me? I shouted. You miss me? So you sleep with them? You bring them into my house, into my life, and then tell me it's not about me. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she whispered, please. Forgive me. I shook my head, laughing bitterly. You're unbelievable. You destroyed everything. Everything. And for what? She stepped closer, her hands outstretched as though to comfort me. I stepped back, my chest heaving. Take your things, I said, my voice low and cold. Get out of my house. Now, before I do something I'll regret. Please let me explain. Now, I roared, pointing to the door. She hesitated, her lips quivering as if she wanted to say something more. Then, slowly, she turned and began to walk toward the bedroom to pack. I stood there, gripping the camera, watching the life I'd built crumble around me. You'll regret this, I muttered, more to myself than to her. And as the door closed behind her, the house fell into a silence so deep it was suffocating. The door slammed shut behind her, leaving the house eerily silent. I stood there for a moment, staring at the emptiness she'd left behind. My chest burned with rage and betrayal, emotions swirling too fast for me to control. Then my eyes fell back on the camera. That cursed device, still perched on the table like a damning witness. Without hesitation, I grabbed it and plugged it into my computer. My hands trembled as I transferred every video, every painful piece of evidence, to my email. Each clip felt like a knife in my gut, but I couldn't stop. If she wanted to destroy me, I'd drag her reputation down with mine. As soon as the files were uploaded, I began posting them online. My social media accounts were barely active, the kind of pages with a handful of followers and no real engagement. But at that moment, I didn't care about views or likes. I wanted the world to see what she had done, to know what kind of person she was behind closed doors, to share my pain. The hours passed in a blur. I paced the house, screaming at no one, my voice hoarse and raw. How could she do this to me? I shouted to the empty walls. My fury boiled over into action. I kicked furniture, threw pillows, slammed cabinet doors. At one point, I aimed a frustrated kick at her nightstand, and the cheapwood gave way under my foot, splintering into pieces. I froze, staring at the wreckage. Among the shards lay a wad of cash, crisp bills bundled tightly. I picked it up and counted $2,000. My mind raced. Why was she hiding this? What else had she been keeping from me? Morning crept in unnoticed, but my body felt the weight of exhaustion. I must have fallen asleep on the couch, still clutching the remnants of the nightstand's drawer. A sharp, relentless banging on the door jolted me awake. My head throbbed as I stumbled downstairs, barely registering the shrill voice accompanying the pounding. Open up, you fool. It was Elena. Her voice was ragged, filled with fury. I hesitated, but the banging only grew louder. I unlocked the door, and she shoved her way in, her face pale but her eyes blazing with anger. What have you done? She screamed, standing inches from me. Why did you post the videos? Now everyone knows me, sees me. Do you even realize what you've done? I took a step back, her intensity catching me off guard. What I've done? I shot back, my voice rising to match hers. What about what you did? You betrayed me. You brought those men into our lives, into our house. You humiliated me first, Elena. Her hands balled into fists at her sides. You've ruined my life, she shrieked. I've been humiliated in front of my family, my friends, everyone. My boss called this morning. I'm going to be fired today because of you. Tears streamed down her face, but they did nothing to soften my anger. Good. I spat. You shouldn't have hidden it from me. This is your fault, Elena. You did this to yourself. Her voice dropped, the venom in her tone cutting through the air like a blade. You're going to regret this, she said, her face contorted in fury. Tonight, you'll have a surprise that will make you very, very happy. What the hell does that mean? I snapped, but she didn't answer. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. I stood there, her parting words echoing in my mind. A chill ran down my spine. What was she planning? Whatever it was, I couldn't trust her. I turned back to my computer, my eyes drifting to the social media posts. My heart sank as I saw the numbers. Each video now had over 50,000 views. Comments were flooding in, a mix of outrage, pity, and cruel jokes at both our expenses. I stared at the screen, numb. I thought the exposure would bring me satisfaction, a sense of justice. But all I felt was emptiness, shame, and then fear. Her words replayed over and over in my head, growing darker each time. I couldn't stay here. Whatever she was planning, I didn't want to find out. I grabbed a duffel bag and began packing. Clothes, cash, my laptop, everything I could fit. By the time the sun began to set, my car was packed, and I was pulling out of the driveway. I drove without looking back, heading for the small village where my second home waited. It was a modest place, hidden away, untouched by the chaos of my life. No one knew about it. Not Elena, not anyone. As I drove through the winding roads, the weight on my chest began to lift, replaced by a quiet resolve. Whatever happened next, I would face it on my terms. I wouldn't let her. The month I spent in the village house felt like an eternity. Each day was a blur of drinking and drowning in bitterness. The company of angry strangers my only solace. They didn't know me, and I didn't know them. We were bound by nothing but our shared hatred for those who'd wronged us. The alcohol dulled the pain, but it also numbed everything else. Hope, ambition, any sense of direction. Every night, I stared at the ceiling, replaying Elena's betrayal in my mind. Her laughter, her lies, those cursed videos, they haunted me. I had thrown away my life, my stability, because of her. The realization came slowly, creeping in like the faint light of dawn after a stormy night. I couldn't live like this anymore. Not for her, not because of her. She had already taken too much from me, but I wouldn't let her take my future too. Returning to the city wasn't easy. The closer I got to my house, the heavier the knot in my stomach grew. The street was quiet when I arrived, the familiar facade of my house a strange comfort. But something was wrong. The windows were shattered. The front door hung ajar, its frame splintered and warped. Yellow police tape crisscrossed the entrance, a stark warning to stay out. I stood there, my chest tightening as the full weight of what I was seeing hit me. My home, my sanctuary, was ruined. I stepped inside cautiously, glass crunching under my feet. The air was stale, carrying the faint smell of damp and rot. The living room was unrecognizable. Furniture lay in ruins. The walls bore deep gouges as if someone had attacked them with a hammer, and the floor was littered with debris. Upstairs was no better. My bedroom, once a place of comfort, had been torn apart. The mattress was shredded, the closet emptied. The few personal belongings I hadn't taken were either missing or destroyed. It wasn't just vandalism, it was rage. Pure, targeted rage. I called the police, my voice shaking as I tried to make sense of the devastation. The officer on the other end told me to wait. Someone would come by shortly. I stood outside, staring at the house as if it might suddenly explain itself. When the officer arrived, his face was grim. "We've been trying to find you," he said. "Where have you been?" I hesitated. "Out of town," I said. "I needed time to think." He nodded, then sighed. "We thought you were gone. We've been looking for you for a month." "And you just went to the village?" "There was an incident at your house." "What incident?" I asked, my stomach twisting. He looked at me, his expression heavy. On the evening of September 18th, your house was attacked. A group of individuals broke in, shouting your name, smashing everything they could find. Neighbors called us, and by the time we arrived, they had fled. But we tracked them down. I stared at him, unable to speak. It wasn't random, he continued. Your wife, Elena, she planned it. We found evidence tying her to the group, and she confessed during questioning. She wanted to send a message, apparently. She didn't take kindly to what you posted. My legs felt weak. Where is she now? I managed to ask. She's in jail, the officer said. 3 years, along with her accomplices. They're all facing charges for vandalism, harassment, and property damage. I blinked, struggling to process his words. The woman I had once trusted, the woman I had loved, had orchestrated this. It wasn't enough to betray me. She had tried to ruin me completely. As I drove away, the image of my ruined house burned in my mind. The walls that had once held my life were now broken, empty, and hollow. There was no going back to what was. I wouldn't even try. By the time I pulled into a quiet street lined with modest apartment buildings, I'd made up my mind. I would sell the house for whatever I could get. Cheap, just enough to cover the debts it had left me with, and move on. A one-room apartment would do. A fresh start, small but my own. The past would remain where it belonged, among the wreckage of my old life. Elena was gone, and so was the pain she had brought with her. It was time to start over, to rebuild, on my terms,